The crystal chandelier above the dining table cast prismatic shadows across the pristine white tablecloth as I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap. Victoria Ashworth's cold blue eyes swept over me with the kind of disdain usually reserved for something one might find on the bottom of their Louboutin heels. So, Marcus tells me you work in, what was it? Retail? Her voice dripped with condescension as she delicately cut into her filet mignon. Property management, actually, I replied evenly, meeting her gaze without flinching. She waved her hand dismissively, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light. Oh yes, managing apartment buildings or some such thing. How quaint. Marcus shifted uncomfortably beside me, and I felt his hand find mine under the table. This was our 6th month together, and I'd successfully avoided this dinner for 5 of them. I should have trusted my instincts. Mother, Elena runs a very successful... Marcus began, but Victoria cut him off with a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. Successful? Darling, don't be absurd. She's practically a peasant compared to our family's standing. She turned her attention back to me, her smile razor-sharp. No offense, dear, but you must understand that the Ashworth name carries a certain prestige. We've been part of society's upper echelon for generations. Our connections, our properties, our influence, it's not something just anyone can understand. I took a slow sip of the vintage wine she'd been so eager to show off, letting it settle on my tongue before swallowing. The 2005 Chateau Margaux was excellent, though I preferred the 2009 vintage I had in my personal cellar. Properties, you say? I asked, keeping my voice light and curious. Victoria's eyes lit up with the opportunity to boast. Oh yes, we have the estate here in Connecticut, of course. The penthouse in Manhattan, Upper East Side, naturally. A charming villa in the Hamptons, and Charles recently acquired a lovely property in Aspen. She paused, examining her manicured nails. Though I suppose that means nothing to someone in your position. Marcus's father, Charles, had been quiet throughout the meal, but now he spoke up. Victoria, perhaps we should... No, Charles. It's important that she understands. Victoria's voice took on a harder edge. Marcus is our only son. He's set to inherit a substantial fortune, and he needs someone who can navigate our world. Someone with breeding, education, the right connections. She looked at me pointedly. Someone who wasn't raised in whatever lower middle-class neighborhood you came from. The irony was so delicious I almost laughed. Instead, I simply nodded. I grew up in the Bronx, actually. The Bronx! Victoria clutched her pearls, literally clutched them, as if I'd just admitted to growing up in a war zone. Good Lord, Marcus, where did you even meet this girl? At a charity gala, Mother. For children's education, remember? The one you couldn't attend because you were in Monaco. Victoria sniffed. Well, I'm sure she was serving drinks or collecting coats. I was the keynote speaker, I said quietly. That stopped her for a moment, but she recovered quickly. How nice that they let anyone speak at those events now, probably for diversity or some such nonsense. I'd had enough. I'd promised Marcus I would be patient, that I would try to win his mother over, but there were limits to what anyone should endure. I set down my wineglass with deliberate care. Mrs. Ashworth, you mentioned your properties. The penthouse on the Upper East Side. Would that be the Vanderbilt building on Park Avenue? She blinked, surprised I knew the name. Yes, actually. How did you... And the villa in the Hamptons, would that be on Meadow Lane in Southampton? Her expression shifted slightly, confusion creeping in. Yes, but I don't see... The Aspen property. Would that be in the West End neighborhood? Mountain View? Victoria's fork had stopped halfway to her mouth. How could you possibly know these details? I smiled, and this time it wasn't forced. Because, Mrs. Ashworth, I'm your landlord. The silence that fell over the table was profound. Even the staff who'd been quietly moving about the room seemed to freeze. Excuse me? Victoria's voice had lost all its hauteur, replaced by something closer to shock. I opened my purse and pulled out my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found what I was looking for. Your penthouse, the entire Vanderbilt building actually, is owned by Castellano Holdings. Your monthly rent is $45,000 and you're currently 3 weeks late on this month's payment. I swiped to another screen. The Southampton Villa is part of the Coastal Elite Properties portfolio, another company under my umbrella. You've been renting there for, 6 years now? Another swipe. And the Aspen property was just acquired by Mountain Peak Investments, my newest venture, about 4 months ago. Your husband's check for that one cleared just last week. Charles had gone pale. Marcus was staring at me with his mouth slightly open. But Victoria looked like she might actually faint. That's, that's impossible, she stammered. You're just a peasant from the Bronx? I finished for her. You're absolutely right about that part. My parents immigrated from the Dominican Republic with nothing but hope and determination. My father worked 3 jobs while putting himself through night school. My mother cleaned houses, possibly even some of your friends' houses, while raising me and my 2 siblings. I leaned back in my chair, feeling more comfortable than I had all evening. When I was 16, my father started buying small, run-down properties in the Bronx, buildings that no one else wanted. He'd fix them up, create affordable housing for families like ours. He taught me everything about real estate, property management, and investment. When he passed away 8 years ago, I inherited his small portfolio of 12 buildings. 12 buildings, Victoria whispered, as if trying to do calculations in her head. That was then. Now, through strategic investments, partnerships, and yes, some very successful property management, I own over 340 properties across New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Colorado, and California. Residential, commercial, industrial. The portfolio's current estimated value is somewhere around $2.7 billion, though it fluctuates with the market. The number hung in the air like a bomb. Billion? Charles finally spoke, his voice barely audible. With a B? With a B, I confirmed. I keep a low profile for several reasons. Security, primarily. Privacy. And because I learned early on that people treat you very differently when they know you have money. I wanted Marcus to love me for who I am, not what I own. I turned to Marcus, who still looked stunned. I was going to tell you soon, I promise. I just wanted to be sure about us first. About you. Elena, he breathed. I don't even know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I squeezed his hand. I love you. That's all that matters to me. Victoria had recovered some of her composure, though her face was still flushed. Well, This is certainly unexpected, but surely you can understand why I was concerned. You gave every appearance of being a peasant, I supplied helpfully. Yes, you made that quite clear, multiple times. She had the grace to look embarrassed. I may have been hasty in my judgment. May have been? Was, she corrected, her voice tight. I was hasty in my judgment. I stood, smoothing down my simple black dress. Valentino, though I doubted she'd recognize it without the obvious branding. Mrs. Ashworth, I'm going to be very clear about something. I didn't build a multi-billion-dollar empire by accident, and I didn't do it by being someone's doormat. I came here tonight as a courtesy to Marcus, who loves you despite your flaws, just as I hope you might eventually love him enough to accept his choices. I picked up my purse. I don't need your money, your name, or your connections. I have my own. What I do need is basic respect and human decency. If you can't provide that, then these dinners are going to be very difficult for everyone involved. Elena, wait. Marcus stood as well, looking between his mother and me. I'm not leaving in anger, I assured him. But I think we've all had enough honesty for one evening. Your mother and I can continue this conversation another time, when she's had a chance to process things. I turned to Charles, who'd been quiet throughout my revelation. Mr. Ashworth, thank you for dinner. The filet was cooked perfectly. He nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. The pleasure was ours, Ms. Rodriguez. Or should I say Ms. Castellano? Rodriguez is my legal name. Castellano is my business name, a combination of my mother's maiden name and my father's. But Elena is fine. As I walked toward the door, Victoria finally found her voice again. Ms. Rodriguez. Elena, please, don't go like this. I paused, looking back at her. She'd stood as well, her perfectly composed mask finally cracking. I apologize. Truly. What I said was inexcusable, regardless of your financial status. You're right. I judged you based on assumptions and prejudices that have no place in how I should treat anyone, least of all someone my son cares for. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was genuine. I could see it in her eyes, in the way her hands trembled slightly. Apology accepted, I said softly. But Mrs. Ashworth, I need you to understand something. My parents taught me that wealth doesn't make you better than anyone else. It's a tool, a responsibility, and sometimes a burden. The way you've spoken tonight, about class, about breeding, about worth, it's not just offensive to me. It's offensive to every hardworking person trying to build a better life for themselves and their families. She nodded slowly. You're absolutely right. I've been in this world so long I've forgotten what really matters. It's not too late to remember, I offered. Marcus came to my side, wrapping his arm around my waist. I think we should all take a breath and start over. Maybe next time dinner can be at Elena's place? I smiled up at him. I have a penthouse in Tribeca. Nothing too fancy. Only 4,000 square feet. But the view is lovely. And I promise not to call anyone a peasant. That broke the tension. Even Victoria cracked a small smile. I'd like that, she said quietly. And Elena? For what it's worth, I'm impressed. Not by the money, though that is certainly impressive, but by what you've built from nothing. That takes remarkable strength and intelligence. Thank you. It took a lot of work, a lot of failures, and a lot of lessons learned the hard way. Charles stood and walked over, extending his hand to me. I have a feeling we'll be seeing a lot more of you, Elena Rodriguez. I look forward to getting to know the real you, the woman who captured our son's heart and apparently owns half of New York City. Not half, I laughed, shaking his hand. Maybe a quarter. As Marcus and I drove back to the city in my car, a modest Honda Accord that I'd kept from my college days, much to my financial advisor's horror, he finally broke the comfortable silence. You own the building my mother lives in. That's incredible. Actually, I own several buildings your family rents properties in. But who's counting? He laughed, that wonderful deep laugh I'd fallen in love with. How did you keep this secret for so long? We've talked about everything, our dreams, our fears, our childhoods. You never once mentioned being a billionaire. Because that's not who I am, Marcus. That's what I have. There's a difference. I glanced at him as we hit a red light. Are you upset I didn't tell you sooner? He considered this carefully. No. Actually, I think I understand why you waited. You wanted to know if I loved Elena Rodriguez, the person, not Elena Castellano, the property mogul. Exactly. Well, I do. I love the woman who volunteers at the children's literacy program every Saturday, who laughs at terrible puns and cries during sad movies, who drinks her coffee with way too much sugar and can't cook to save her life. Hey, I can cook. Cereal doesn't count, mi amor. I laughed, my heart full. Your mother really did help me decide something tonight, though. What's that? That I want to start being more public about my philanthropy. I've been donating anonymously for years, but maybe it's time to use my platform. And yes, my wealth, to make a bigger difference. To show kids from neighborhoods like mine that there's no limit to what they can achieve. Marcus reached over and took my hand. I think that's wonderful. And I think you're wonderful. Even though I'm a peasant from the Bronx. Especially because you're a peasant from the Bronx who conquered Manhattan. We drove in comfortable silence for a while. The city lights blinking past us like stars. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it at the next light. It was from Victoria. Thank you for being patient with a foolish old woman. I hope I can earn your forgiveness and, perhaps one day, your friendship. Victoria. I showed it to Marcus. Your mother is texting me. That's unprecedented. She barely knows how to use her phone. She probably had your father help her. I smiled, typing back a quick response. What did you say? Marcus asked. That we all make mistakes, and what matters is how we grow from them. And that I look forward to having her over for dinner next month. You're remarkable, you know that? I'm just a girl from the Bronx who got lucky and worked hard. No, Marcus said seriously. You're so much more than that. You're proof that grace and class have nothing to do with money or breeding. My mother learned a valuable lesson tonight, one she desperately needed to learn. As we pulled up to my building, a beautiful pre-war structure that I'd renovated myself, I reflected on the evening's events. Victoria's words had stung. There was no denying that, but they'd also liberated me from the pretense I'd been maintaining. The doorman greeted me warmly. Good evening, Miss Rodriguez. How was your dinner? Enlightening, Carlos. Very enlightening. In the elevator, Marcus pulled me close. I have one question. Shoot, when you said you owned half the city, were you exaggerating? I grinned up at him. Well, I might have been slightly hyperbolic. It's more like a third. His laughter echoed through the elevator shaft as we rose toward my penthouse, the one I'd bought and renovated myself, filled with art from local Dominican artists and photographs of my family. The space where I was just Elena, not a billionaire or a property mogul, but a woman who loved deeply, worked hard, and never forgot where she came from. As I unlocked the door and stepped into my sanctuary, I thought about my father's words, spoken to me the day he bought his first building. Mija, money can open doors, but character keeps them open. Never let wealth change who you are at your core. I hadn't, and I never would. Victoria Ashworth might have called me a peasant, but she was right about one thing. I was a peasant. A peasant who'd worked her way up from nothing, who'd taken her father's dream and multiplied it 1,000-fold, who'd proven that in America, with enough determination and hard work, anyone could build an empire. And that, I thought as Marcus wrapped his arms around me and kissed my forehead, was something to be truly proud of. The next morning, I woke to a flood of emails. Word had apparently spread through certain social circles about who I really was. There were interview requests, charity board invitations, and even a message from the mayor's office about a housing initiative. But the one that made me smile was from Victoria Ashworth. Dear Elena, I've been doing some research on your company's charitable work. Would you have time this week to discuss a potential partnership with the Children's Literacy Foundation I chair? I think we might have more in common than I initially realized. With respect and admiration, Victoria. I showed it to Marcus over coffee. Your mother wants to work together on a literacy program. Character development in real time, he mused. It's like watching someone level up in a video game. More like watching someone remember who they used to be before society's expectations buried it. I typed out a response, agreeing to meet. Because that's what you do when someone extends an olive branch. You take it, nurture it, and help it grow into something beautiful. My father used to say that the measure of a person isn't how they treat their equals, but how they treat those they perceive as beneath them. Victoria had failed that test spectacularly at dinner. But she was trying to do better, and that deserved acknowledgement. As I sipped my coffee and looked out over the Manhattan skyline, a view I'd earned through sleepless nights, risky investments, and unwavering determination, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Not just for the success, but for the journey that got me here. I was Elena Rodriguez, daughter of Dominican immigrants, a girl from the Bronx who'd built an empire one property at a time. And no amount of old money snobbery could ever take that away from me. Because at the end of the day, we're all peasants in our own way. The only difference is what we choose to build with our hands, our hearts, and our heritage. And I had built something extraordinary,